You won't believe the masterful move by the Ukrainian Army that baffles Russian soldiers. War news today. Western analysts of the Ukraine war have crucial concentration on Russian strategy in conjunction with the efficiency of its armed units on the battlefield and from the air. However, this, like all wars, is a two-sided and dynamic human influence. So the question arises whether Ukraine's defense strategy is tremendously adept and capable of delivering a victory. Russia has made numerous mistakes, but Ukraine has made good use of its weaker hand. It is a smaller country in size, demography, economic growth, and armed units than its invader. Why has it been so successful in defending itself from military troops of nuclear-armed superpowers? In short, Ukrainian strategy formulation has outpaced that of Russia's president and his experts. What decisive components of the Ukrainian strategic approach have enabled this to occur? To comprehend the strategy, we must first get to the bottom of the political outcomes sought by the Zelensky administration from a military conflict that was forced upon them. Zelensky declares Ukraine's territorial sovereignty and integrity as beyond doubt, and his goal is peace and reinstatement of normal life. The Ukrainian strategy for achieving these goals flows from these political goals. This requires much thought. The Ukrainians are unlikely to openly reveal their strategy for protecting their country amid a war. However, we extensively researched the Ukrainian plan of action to describe the most likely elements. Continuous expansion of global assistance. The establishment and continued growth of international support constitute the first component. This has been done through diplomacy, international gatherings, and a skillfully designed geopolitical influence campaign that has helped Ukraine gain support in many, but not all, countries worldwide. Hacktivists aiming to undermine Russian information and cyber warfare capabilities have ably supported it. President Zelensky's live-streamed speeches to the U.S. Congress, NATO forums, and several national parliaments have also increased his international influence. No political figure in history has, without a doubt, ever been given such an influential platform in so many national legislatures to request military and humanitarian aid for his nation. Maintaining the national war. The continuation of a national strategy for the war constitutes the second component. It is believed that Ukraine faces an existential threat due to the Russian invasion. For self-defense, it has enlisted the aid of its entire military, commercial, economic, informational, and diplomatic resources. Safeguard Ukrainians. The protection of its citizens is a third component of Ukrainian strategy. All legitimate governments are accountable for this, but conflicts make this an extremely challenging task. The Ukrainian government has endeavored to retain essential services like hospitals, firefighters, and other cornerstones of secure communities, despite the difficulties posed by Russia's systematic slaughter of cities and the people who live in them. After all, what is a nation if not its citizens? As long as humans are alive, Zelensky argued, we must continue to defend them. And this is the primary distinction between how opposing factions in this conflict view the world. Precision hits provide depth and have cascading consequences. Ukraine has demonstrated a mastery of deploying precision strikes to obstruct the movement of Russian soldiers on a more tactical level. Anti-tank guided missiles, conventional armored formations, artillery, and swarms of loitering munitions, airborne drones that detect and then attack targets, have all been deployed by Kiev to exert pressure on Russian ground forces. As a result, the nation's aeroplanes, special operations forces, and long-range, highly precise missiles are now free to search for Russian radars, command centers, and supply depots. As a result, Russian troops have encountered numerous challenges and have managed to amass enough fighting capability to launch a counterattack and stop the Ukrainian advance. The complex war system is more controlled by power rules than linear dynamics. This means a smaller, more mobile force, like the Ukrainians, can overcome more powerful forces. Shock and dislocation were caused by the Ukrainian counteroffensive's tactical depth and simultaneity. Before we go any further, we want you to subscribe to our channel, War News Today, because your support is our strength and inspiration. Let's examine Russia and Ukraine's proactive strategy without further ado. In a confrontation, deception is still feasible. Modern warfare is fought in an era of open-source intelligence. Politicians, soldiers, and civilians are always under fire from social media posts, commercial satellite images, and other sources. However, Ukrainians have demonstrated to the rest of the world that deception is still possible in today's highly connected information environment. The counteroffensive developed by Ukraine's military planners was based on antiquated ideas that have been modernized. They employed an updated version of the 19th century army term, central position. Napoleon is thought to have introduced this idea when he placed his forces between two opposing armies to divide the enemy. Because of Ukraine's strategic location, Russia has had to consider the likelihood of Ukrainian soldiers attacking from any direction. This deft ploy meant that Kiev created the conditions for the massive defeat of Putin's forces in the east and upcoming operations to reclaim Kherson when combined with Ukraine's strategic location. Magruder's principle. Ukraine also used a slick style of deceit, including components of the so-called Magruder's principle. According to this hypothesis, persuading a target to hang on to a current belief is simpler than accepting a novel concept. This tactic of using public pronouncements and actions to influence an opponent's judgments is also compatible with the antiquated Soviet idea of reflexive control, which employs disinformation to distort the target's perception of reality and induce them to undertake self-defeating choices. Ukraine affirmed Russian perceptions that Kherson would be the primary target of the counteroffensive's opening attack by executing operations that dispersed Russian units along the Delta River and making public declarations that implied Ukraine would attack Kherson. Capable military. Maintaining an effective military in the field is the final component of the Ukrainian strategy. The Ukrainians must resist Russian military advances in cyberspace, the air, and the ground. Despite having been an actor in comic in the past, President Zelensky understands how important it is to keep his military forces strong while they repel the Russians. He also realizes that he needs military support from the West to keep them engaged in battle. These pillars are essential to enable Ukraine to accomplish its political goals. We can pose one more query by comprehending these aspects. Will Ukraine succeed? Zelensky and his military, on the other hand, obviously do. They have battled the Russians to a standstill on the ground and in the air. Many people worldwide now support them, and they have gotten a lot of military and humanitarian aid. Nevertheless, the well-organized Ukrainian military has launched several counteroffensives in the south and the Kiev region. Additionally, as the war drags on, Putin's domestic and economic situation gets increasingly challenging. Ukraine can succeed, but needs substantial military, conciliatory, economic, and humanitarian assistance. Politics still continues in the form of war. A political timeline determined the timing and setting of Ukraine's most recent counteroffensive. To prevent Russia from using the strategy it used to annex Ukrainian territories in 2014 through the Minsk Accord, Kiev needs to prevent it from holding an illegal referendum in Kherson and on Israeli occupation to the east. Moscow planned to utilize the referendum to convince the Russian public that it had made progress since annexing Ukrainian territory. The latest counteroffensive may have made it more difficult for Moscow to vote in occupied territory, even if it did not win significant areas or eliminate entire Russian divisions. Instead of safeguarding polling places, Russian forces would have been compelled to defend the front. Despite the counteroffensive's success, this political logic questions whether Russian forces will soon be decisively defeated on the battlefield. Therefore, while the counteroffensive's operational and tactical achievements are significant, Ukraine's strategic goal revolves around politics. H.G. Wells famously said, "If we don't end the war, war will end us." This war is now practically ravaging the lives on people of both sides. The Russia-Ukraine war caused significant geopolitical turbulence in conjunction with many negative issues in the global economy. Prices for power generation and farm commodities have begun to rise since the beginning of the war. Global economic insecurity affects different regions differently. But in the end, if there is to be lasting peace after the battle, all sides must make concessions. The challenging element right now will be determining if the leaders of Russia and Ukraine, including their allies, can strike a political compromise that leads to such an outcome. That is all about the Russian-Ukrainian conflict and their strategic approach. We hope you enjoyed our points of view and this video. Press the button and share your thoughts on the war. Is it necessary? Click the bell icon to receive the first update and subscribe to our channel, War News Today.